it's easy to say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. But I think the question about relationships, I got to look at me first.
The dating apps and the conversation with the therapy thing,
so
that was super interesting to me.
how am I creating the relational dynamic that I'm experiencing?
Is this the type of person I'd want my kid to be married to?
Ooh, that's
I think can be a good one.
This is what you're going to be dealing with. Like, you knew what you were signing up
Check,
for.
please. I don't think you go to school to be a therapist. I think you're born as one.
Behind the scenes, what are we as therapists talking about?
The idea isn't what you do, but why do you do it?
The why is almost always more interesting than the what.
That's the unsaid thing.
Oh, I'm saying it. I'm going there. Welcome to the Insight and Actions podcast. We're going to touch on some things that are relevant in your life today in terms of romance, relationships, and love. We're also going to make a point of showing love to one another. So I'm going to pass it off to the right to the great Craig James.
Well, welcome again. I didn't expect that type of love.
I mean, I got to get a love. We got the red right here and everything.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Craig James, as Johnny said, founding partner, Insight and Action Therapy. I'm glad you all are back. And I'm going to pass my love to my man on the right, Matty Ice.
Here we go again. Happy to be with y'all. I'm with my my good friend, colleague, excellent therapist.
The love doctor.
Dressed to the nines. I mean, look at you. My goodness. What I wouldn't give to live one day is Johnny Pierce. But Dr. Johnny Pierce, don't call him doctor, but I just did. Y'all ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Let's go. Looking at relationships and the impact that they have on romantic relationships, how it shows up on the individual, how it shows up in therapy. And I'm throwing it at you, Matt. Question, thoughts, comments.
It's one of the biggest issues. People tend to have so many less relationships in their life in general, and the romantic relationship, the boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse becomes so central to people's social life and identity. And also, I think at times, I don't know if this is your all's experience, where it's almost like the romantic relationship difficulties. It's almost the last rung of the ladder of there's all of these things building up, and now it's spills over into the romantic relationship, and now that's the thing that's maybe bringing someone into therapy or seems so chaotic on the surface. So it's almost a kind of a signal of other things that are happening for people, in addition to being just so impactful in themselves. What do you think, Johnny?
I mean, it's definitely a milestone event. Think about a person's development going back into childhood. There's a time when you feel like everybody's just in the extension of yourself, and then eventually you realize, oh, no, that's just me. And then you start to bond with others, and then eventually you become curious about people in a romantic sense. I mean, the Valentine's Day cards and the candies and stuff like that. And then something happens at a point during maybe pre-adolescence into adolescence where now I really care about these people, whether they're friends or I can see them as somebody I might be romantically interested in. And I really want them to like me too. And if they don't like me too, what does that say about me? And I think that becomes a catalyst to a lot of development. Some people are able to delay that longer than others. So they might get through into high school without having had that first heartbreak or anything of the sort. I mean, prom is this milestone event. We don't have too many rituals for transitioning into adulthood in our culture these days, but prom's still an event. Junior prom, all that good stuff. And then after high school, are you going into the workforce? Are you going off to college? If you go off to college, you get exposed to people in a very different way. Relationships become far more fluid because now I live here and I see you in class or whatever the case may be. So as a person's developing the self, that part of life is developing as well. Yeah. And I would say of the people that I work with right now, every single case, whether they're couple sessions or it's an individual, relationships are a topic. And for the single clients, they're talking about dating. For the married clients, they're talking about navigating parenthood and marriage. It's no escaping it. It's a crucial element in life. What do you see?
All of the above. Yeah, I think, you all are identifying it at different phases of life. Romance is something that whether it's, we see it, we grow up in it, we see it, music talks about it, we want it,
I love movies.
the movies.
Oh man.
There's the Hallmark Channel, which
Oh, yeah.
is restricted in my house.
Oh yeah. Disney. Disney is big.
We all
Yeah,
look
from
for
very young age, the messages.
it is.
Yeah.
The messaging is there. And so, Valentine's Day, in February, if you're in a relationship, there's an expectation. If you're not, what's wrong, right? So
Singles Awareness Day. I think that's what it's called.
I think it has ability
I like
to
that.
tap into. I do like it. It really taps into what we're experiencing, what we're feeling. And I think beyond relationship to me is code for connection, right? I want a connection with my romantic partner. I want a connection with my best friends. I want a connection with my colleagues, right? We're wanting it. It just looks different at different phases of life, at different times of different people in life. I think we can say romance, we can say connection. It's all around us. It's just how do we understand it, I guess, right? And not only understand it, what is our ability to sit in it when it's good, but more so when it's not good?
Ooh, I'm so glad you mentioned that,
Because
Craig.
that's the piece is it.
How many of us have seen people succeed in distress? Whether you grew up in a 2-parent home or not,
Right.
whether, it was extended family. I think in my mother's side of the family, which I was most close to, there was one marriage that I got to see firsthand. My grandfather passed away before my mom was even a teenager, so although they were married until he was gone, never got to see that firsthand. My mom was unwed. Many of my aunts and uncles, like, I didn't get to see them in marriage, but I got to see some cousins in marriage, and they stayed together through thick and thin. But it looked so dysfunctional that it was not the best representation in my mind. And then I've gone on to go 2 for 2, twice married, twice divorced, and I got some stats about that. I'm not alone in my endeavors. Won't be trying for a third. But how do you succeed in distress? I don't know how many people actually get to see relationships go through hard times and come out on the other end of it. I think we've got a very clear narrative from movies about how it's supposed to go, that the couple breaks up for a little bit and then some cataclysmic thing brings them back together and they realize they were silly for breaking up in the first place. But how many get to see that in real life?
Yeah.
I don't think we do.
Yeah, I think that part with the expectations that we put on romantic relationships in our culture is pretty wild when you step back from it. I was listening to something recently that really opened my eyes to that of what a recent development this is. That seems like, oh, this is just kind of the natural order of things. That there's this one person, we fall in romantic love with them, and then they're more or less the idea is they're going to fulfill all my needs. You'll have some kind of like around that, but my emotion, yes,
The one.
the one, yes, this idea of the one, capital T, capital O. That in other cultures, and even not that long in the past in our culture, this would have been a very alien idea. The idea that a marriage or a romantic relationship is going to be serving this amount of functions in someone's life. And it's like, all right, if we're taking that into it, are we setting ourselves up for failure in the first place?
Right.
Yeah.
By default, you have to be, because if you're a child, you're a small child, there's not one person that satisfies all your needs at that time.
Yeah.
And as a child, your needs are pretty basic. You need to be fed, you need to be cleaned, you need to be assisted with getting to sleep and dressed. So you got pretty basic needs then, and one person alone, if anybody's taxed with that alone, it tends to cause them distress. Magnify that by 20 years of life now, you're sophisticated, you have various tastes, you have various activities that you're into, so forth and so on. One person trying to be all things means that they don't get to be themselves.
Well, yeah, you were speaking to, I think what you're, yes, I completely agree. But it goes back to the expectations that we have or that are put on us. And it reminds me of what we're talking about is having an awareness, but having some experience. I think when early marriages, we're naive, right? When you get married, and if you're less than 30 and you're married, you're just you're all about love. And you got this guy, look, oh, she's the one, he's the one. You don't really know anything. You got to go through some stuff, right? Every relationship goes through something. I actually think, the couples that we see or people talk about don't argue in front of the kids, or my parents never argued in front of me. Well, was that really the best model? Because they had to go through something to make it 20, 30, 40 years. So I think the idea of the expectations it's naive, which is okay. I mean, it's reality. You don't know what you don't know. But back to the other piece about being the one, I'm with you. I don't know that I expect my wife to do everything for me. I would say, the idea of the 80-20 rule. She gives me 80% of everything I need, right? That 20%, that's for me to go figure out. That's where I have you guys, we talk. I've got my friends that we play golf with. I've got my brother. I've got a lot of other people in that 20% to give me what my wife isn't supposed to give me. Right? What is it? Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
No.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. I like that way of framing it. And something that I also see is people put this off indefinitely. And then, I mean, I see it more with women because there's a biological clock
There's
there
a clock
in terms of having kids that's different, that's unique to women. But now it's like, okay, I'm in my kind of hitting my mid 30s, early 30s. And then there's this panic of, oh, I didn't pair up with somebody. There's not as many people out there. And I actually do want these things for my life. I do want to have a family. I do want to have kids. That's one thing I see. I work with a lot of young adults as well. And there can be a lot of frustration and difficulties if I can't find a partner.
Yeah.
With dating apps where it seems like the reality of it is there's a small percentage of men and a small percentage of women that are the highly desirable ones that are getting the vast majority of the attention.
Right.
And that leaves a lot of people that are having trouble finding people. And that it seems like there's a big bucket of young men, big bucket of young women that are all looking for something and having difficulty finding it. And I think there's some reality in the fact that they don't want each other.
Which is fascinating.
I would
those
say
two groups that need each other don't want each other.
Need each other,
often.
don't want each other, because I think it goes back to the expectations, right? Well,
Right,
I need you to
right.
have all of these things before I consider you. Well, wait a second. How about we do it together? Right? I think, what is it? It reminds me a lot when you're talking about this, the book, What to Expect When Expecting, right? You create this narrative about what your kid's supposed to be, what your partner's supposed to be, and when they're not, there's something wrong. It's not there's something wrong. This idea of a one size fits all doesn't work. The one doesn't work. And so what is our patience for the process? But also, well, who's your source for this? Right? Who is the source that tells you what you should be looking for?
Right.
And I think I would also add that the generations, I'm 52, 51, somewhere in there. I stopped counting after 40.
I get you.
The idea is, I would understand why people are deferring relationships, marriage, because they're inundated with too much.
Right.
I really feel a level of empathy and compassion for the generations that are younger than me, because you have too much to deal with. Right? You got internet, social media, you've got life, career, parents, this, that.
Well, everything's been specialized and compartmentalized in such a way that even the process of finding the one or someone, people don't tend to do it the way that it once may have been done. So it might have been that you went to school with somebody, they lived in your community, you got to see them develop over time, and that drew you in. You saw them mature into a version of themselves, and as a result, that brought you to them.
And when you date them, I got to call your house. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Pierce.
Got to navigate your people.
Can I speak to such and such? So there's a delay, right? Delayed gratification. Today, I want to talk to you. I text you, and I text you all my thoughts. Y'all heard me say, I miss pagers.
It's okay.
When you page me, you got to wait for me to call you back.
Right.
Right. With a text message, I'm telling you I need you now. And I'm also...
I expect you to respond immediately, regardless of what you're doing.
And I'm thinking about you, so I have to share it. No, think about me and keep it. I don't need it.
Think about it and keep it. and then forget it by the time we talk again.
That's okay, right?
That's
But that's
what
a
I'm
part
going
of-
for. It's more than okay.
It is.
That's building up the story. That's building
the
up the
romance.
right. Instead of trying to force this romance by having these extravagant first dates, nothing wrong. Hey, if you want to go out there and you want to drop some serious change on the first date, go for it.
Man, please don't
But,
do that. Call
hey, if
yourself
that's what
done.
you want
Johnny,
to do,
you're dressed like a man who's going to drop
Yeah,
some extravagant
exactly.
stuff
I
on the first
I don't.
date.
He's flying you
I
in his
don't.
private jet.
I don't.
Let's,
Me,
put, let's
I'm-
put this expectation out there.
I'm not dating currently, and when I was dating, no.
Yes,
no,
you did.
No, I ain't got it like that. But that being said, when you are trying to have something that is going to last, how are you starting the process? You have to start with a foundation. You don't build something to last without the foundation, and I don't know if we have the patience for that these days.
So, Matt, what's our man on the street question?
Y'all want to check it out?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go to it.
Hey guys, wanted to get some relationship advice. I have a family member who's in a pretty serious relationship, trying to determine if she's ready for the next step. What are some questions she should be asking herself?
Wow, what a question. I don't know if it can be a single question as much as, is this somebody I believe that I can grow with and I can allow space for them to grow? Because if I cannot grow with them, then what makes sense right now may not make sense later. And if I can't allow them space to grow, then I'm almost guaranteeing that we'll run into conflict because they are a person that will undoubtedly grow over time. Having space to grow isn't something that you can just kind of set aside and just, okay, I'm going to set aside this much space to grow. It's got to be a mindset that growth is normal, growth is healthy, and it can at times be very unpredictable. What might seem like a step back or this person's pulling away from me, like that may not be what's going on at all. So if there's not an openness to the relationship where questions can be asked about what's going on internally with somebody, that might be a challenging relationship to be able to make progress with. And if there's not a respect for the fact that you may not grow in the way I want you to grow, I may not grow in the way you want me to grow, but are you willing to have space for me to do that? I think that would be a big piece.
The fact that you're asking the question, the individual's asking the question, I can appreciate it, right?
Right.
I don't think we relate. A friend of mine made a statement: marriage and love have nothing to do with each other, right? He's been married. He was talking about, love is a feeling, marriage is a contract, and so it's when we talk about relationships as a whole, that's a lot of work. Because what I love about you now and what's interesting, and we have fun, may be the challenge that we face down the road.
Most definitely.
It reminds me of the movie, like The Story of Us I think it's The Story of Us with Bruce Willis and Michelle Pfeiffer, how they were having marital problems, they had kids, and she reflects back like he always drove around with the car on E. And it was cute early on, and now she can't stand it. And the conflict, there's a scene in the movie, and I'm off the top of my head, where he says to her, I supported your growth. I didn't have a problem with you growing, but you're upset because I didn't grow. So I think the fact that he's asking questions about relationship is a good thing.
You don't see it as like I agree actually with what you're saying.
Yeah.
You don't see it as like, oh, this is a red flag if I'm asking these questions or I'm having this.
Too often that term has gotten thrown out in the wrong direction, man.
Yeah.
Like, if you have to ask questions, that means you're thinking about it. What other space in our lives do we say, oh, if I got to ask a question, it's a problem? No.
Especially with the like one of the most important decisions or issues
Especially
in
with
our
a
life.
person outside of yourself with a whole nother brain. Like, you're not a mind reader. So you can do the whole, I'm just going to see what they do and I'm going to let that tell me. But people do things for various reasons. We don't get motive out of action.
And I think the growth thing is important, and looking at, so there's like the love piece you mentioned and how important is that and what do you mean by that, the romantic love piece. But I think looking at, do I really respect this person? Are there things that I admire about this person? I think those type of questions. If I have a kid, is this the type of person I'd want my kid to be married to?
Ooh, that's
I think can be a good one because it gets to that question of like, do I really respect this person in a deeper way, in some way that's kind of based more on something like values or growth. And another thing that comes to mind as well is, and I think a question to be asking oneself is, are there certain conversations or topics that we've been avoiding?
Yes.
Or that I've been avoiding about the future? And if so, looking at what would it look like to address those things and then seeing how that goes.
Yes.
Well, I
And
think
so
what
when
you-
we have to hash out those things, I think that can kind of be a predictor of like, can I grow with this person? Can we work this thing out? Because it's going to be tough,
Because the question that I can ask about you, the other person, but really I need to be asking about me.
Gotta do it.
When you do couples work, it's easy to look at what he did, what she did. A question I like to pose to couples that are seeing me or that I'm working with: what is my responsibility to the state of our relationship? Right? It's easy to say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. But I think the question about relationships, I got to look at me first.
Oh, Craig,
right?
you're hitting on my language right there.
I think it's a matter of who am I, where am I? So my dad, and I love, for all of us who've been around the older, wiser generation, they give a lot of knowledge, and I love it. My dad said to me, 3 things you want to look for in a partner. He said, number 1, and this is his view, which it makes sense as he explained it, 2-parent household. He said, and you can't always guarantee it, but when in a 2-parent household, your partner sees how, a husband and a wife and a husband work together. It's a partnership. He said, so number 1, 2-parent household. He said, number 2, you should want her to have to go to college, have a degree. She's gone beyond the minimum. She can work, towards something. And he said the 3rd thing was siblings, learning how to share. Then when he's telling me that as a kid, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Man, please. If he didn't drop wisdom on me about what to look for, but it was also what I had, and he explained what I needed to look for and why it was important to me. It was not about the other person as much it was, what are the values you're looking for? Because that's what I was raised in. Hey, man, look, wise.
Oh,
a
most
lot of
definitely.
wisdom. Go ahead, what you want to say?
Yeah, no, I think you hit on some big things.
No, he hit on some big things.
He hit on some big things.
Gotta give him his credit, right?
And you're plagiarizing some very important things, which is we call that pulling a Craig around here. Johnny says something brilliant, Craig comes, takes it, says it when Johnny isn't around, and gets rich.
Yes.
But I think you bring up super important points of looking at oneself, and which is kind of in there too of what are my models? Like, what do I even think a relationship should look like? And what is my model for what this should look like? Which it goes back to what you were saying with at least part of it of the parents' relationship and the attachment to the parents, and asking yourself these type of questions, and often doing some kind of work on oneself. I don't think it has to be therapy. Therapy could be part of it.
I'm so glad you said that, man.
I know you had some thoughts. Lay it on us, Johnny.
Oh man. So for starters, I do couples therapy as well. Apparently I'm the couples person here at Insight, and I love it.
Dr.
It's
Love.
great. Dr. Love. I mean, there you go. You got me. Or, given my name is Dr. Pierce, maybe it hurts. But that said, I do a little exercise. It doesn't take much time. You just put your arms out and you wiggle your arms around. And I say to couples very easily, like, this right here doesn't take much work. You could probably do this all day. It doesn't actually exercise many muscles or anything like that. But then you do this. And this, you literally will see a flex in your forearm because it's causing you to have to work. Your shoulders will feel a tension that they don't feel when they do this. Because when you turn it this way and you look at how am I contributing to what's going well, what's going poorly, how am I creating the relational dynamic that I'm experiencing? You gain accountability and responsibility in a way that you just don't get from the blame game. You can always find something with the other. If you look at the other person, they don't do things they did at the beginning. They do things they didn't do at the beginning. You can highlight how they say something a certain way or whatever the case may be. It's always something the other person is doing. That's always going to be the case in any facet of life, any relationship. If I don't look at myself, though, whether it's at a transitional stage in a relationship, it's years into it where we've gotten into a groove or maybe we've gotten out of a groove, whatever it might be, if I can't look in the mirror, then I'm powerless. I sit in the seat of victimhood. You got to make it better. I can't even help you with that. It's no point in me doing anything. All hope can be lost. You come into a couple session, and although you're hearing body, you're not hearing spirit because he the problem, she the problem, they the problem, whoever's the problem.
What was the thing you were bringing up earlier when we were talking before getting on mic and camera about with the dating apps and the conversation with the therapy thing? That was super interesting to me.
So usually Matt drops the stats, and today I get the pleasure of doing so. So one of the more popular dating apps out there is Bumble, and they've done some research on their users. So one of the things they determined by, talking to their users or getting feedback was that roughly 32% of them actually felt that emotional intimacy was more important to a relationship success than sex. And, as we were all talking together, that made a lot of sense to us because, okay, well, you're looking for security, you're looking for somebody you can trust, safety. You're looking to be vulnerable, safety, etc. That follows. And also, anybody who's had good sex knows it's a little easier to have that good sex when you actually are emotionally invested in the person. You trust them. You can be more vulnerable, all that good stuff. But the thing that really got us talking was that 60% of Bumble users in the U.S. are comfortable talking about mental health on the first date. And that is probably not what you would have heard, even in the pre-dating app era. I think that something's been said about the amount of people who are willing to use mental health services. I am concerned, and I've voiced this concern in our podcast, and I do it in sessions as well. I hope that mental health doesn't become Planet Fitness. It was really popular when Planet Fitness first came out to get the Black Card. Because the Black Card allowed you to go to any Planet Fitness anywhere in the U.S. So people get their Black Card. They got the little keychain. They got the little sticker. You just see them driving around. So much pride. But how many of those folks were actually getting into the gym? Getting on the elliptical, the treadmill, picking up the dumbbells, doing some squats. How many people are actually following through on using the service to its maximum potential? Because being in therapeutic services is no guarantee that you're actually utilize them to their maximum potential. And my concern and my fear is that as we become more willing to engage it and we destigmatize mental health services, that we also not lose the fact that it is work, that you must go in there and you must look at yourself. You must actually do the work, whether you're doing it for the sake of a relationship or just to better yourself. It's not enough to have the Black Card. You got to do the work as well.
Craig, you were saying something when we were talking about it, like related to boundaries, this idea of the first date, talking about mental health. It's interesting thing to think about.
I think for me, I love the fact that the profession there's a value in what we do. But I sometimes wonder, when are we deciding when to go to therapy, right? Or are we going to therapy to avoid something? Or are we going to therapy to work through something? And I just sometimes wonder is similar to the idea of the lifetime card, the Planet Fitness card. I don't want it to be watered down, right? I feel that we get the opportunity in life to go through something. So it's, when do you find the need to come and see us or someone else, right? That's just my thing is I love what we do. I don't want it to be marginalized. And I don't think everything that when people show up, not everything needs to be in therapy. I will tell you, as a practice, think about how often we get screening calls and we're like, listen, we'd love to work with you. That's not therapeutic, right? That is life experience. That is a kid going through something.
Not everything's clinical.
Right? Let's go do these things and see how that works out for you and call us back. I would say we probably deflect 15, 20% of calls that come in or defer out. Don't go to therapy yet. Call us back. Try this stuff out. So, but you were thinking.
No, that all makes, and I think I'll lay this out and, or comment on it. And I think this is probably a whole other topic that will take us down a different rabbit hole, maybe for a different day though. But that thing of the therapy as avoidance and it seems like can kind of be used almost as like a status symbol sometimes of like, oh, I'm in therapy, I have a therapist, or, I have this mental health disorder. It becomes almost like a kind of narcissism where it's like,
it goes back to that persona thing you talked about.
I'm this or that. And it's like, it's almost like a way of signaling I'm deep.
It's my,
In a way that's
identity.
kind of gross to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it
I shouldn't
is.
say that as a therapist, but it's like
No, it
it's like, all right.
is.
And
I
like
think-
in the therapy
yeah.
talk and the language, and it's
And the
maybe
tone,
just an
the
aesthetic.
tone is the big piece
yeah,
of it.
kind of bring your
the
voice
kinda
down a little bit.
moral
and
high ground,
this kind of face.
professorial, talking down upon. I've done the work.
Mhm.
Have you even looked at yourself?
Mhm.
And that, I think men can do it. I think women can do it. I think teens can do it. I think elderly people can do it. I think anyone who's bettered themselves can sometimes kind of misplace how it is demonstrated and displayed. And whenever that occurs, it doesn't actually draw people in. It pushes them away because the sense that they get is that, oh, you've done all this work and this is how you came out. This is what was produced from you doing that work. Jesus. Like,
Well, and I think back to the question, right, which is dating. Is that really the first thing you talk about on the first date?
It's a little weird.
I'm old.
I think it's such a great thing to talk about, to be open. So I feel
Yeah.
like there's part of me that feels conflicted even saying that, but it's, I don't know.
I think about it like
it's just like
this.
it's fetishized sometimes in a certain generation, in certain demographics. I don't mean across the board. In many cultures, it's the exact opposite, but there's a certain lane where it's almost fetishized. Like I said, to me, it almost goes this thing where it's like, this is my mental health disorder. This is my therapy. And, but again, it signals I'm deep.
and it also may even become the shield that I throw out there that
Right.
I'm telling you up front that I have this, not because my intention is to work at it, but because I'm saying to you, this is what you're going to be dealing with. Like, I've made you aware. You knew what you were signing up
Check,
for.
please.
And if we get to a place where that's what we're doing, we come to the table and we bear all our wounds in the first get together, then what we're demonstrating is the amount of damage that has occurred and the fact that we have not done the work to heal. Because it's not I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging, oh yeah, I've been in therapy, or oh yeah, I'm in therapy now. I think that at a first date, that's the introduction. And as we get to know each other better,
Then we share it. So as we wrap up today, we get to really close out on our insightful thoughts. Johnny, you go first.
I'm glad I get the opportunity. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and I'll admit that I've been banging on the table for a few podcasts now, because I do think that relationships are the stuff of life, and that we care deeply about one another, and we can do so across various spectrums. Like, love is not exclusively romantic. Please don't limit yourself to only romantic love. Your life will be less as a result. When you do love others, love them in ways that go beyond what it does for you. If it's just an exchange of goods and services, then I don't know how loving that is. When you look for a person, or if you happen to be interested in multiple people, have some kind of criterion in mind. It doesn't have to be that they got to check every box or be a particular type or cast. But if you have no idea what you're going for, then you'll give everyone space and opportunity in a place that does not tend to respond well to damage. So if you aren't careful about who you allow to occupy that space, and they do damage to you, not because they mean to, but simply because they're not a good fit for the space, you may take that damage with you into another evaluation process and hold that person responsible for things they never did. So don't limit yourself in terms of how you love. Be mindful about how you give space to others to love you. And before you go trying to figure out who's the one, if there is a one, figure out who you are.
My insightful thought in terms of relationships is really it understand where you are, right? What is it you're looking for? Who are the models that you aspire to have, or who's modeling what you aspire to have? But there's work in terms of getting to that place and not being avoidant of the work. I think is important. It's a process. I think I will use the term process a lot in the work that I do with clients. It's not about, while we as people look for the outcome, the ability to work in the process, it's about connection. It's really about growth in terms of who you are and where you want to be and how you get there. Relationships take work. And I will say that, my parents were great models for me. My dad's insights in terms of the qualities that you want to look for and why they were important made sense. They make sense now. When he said it to me, I heard him, but I didn't get it.
Right.
But you got to go through something for that stuff to matter. Old wives' tales, that stuff's there for a reason. And so I believe it's a process. I think it's, romantic love and all the types of love we speak to are about security. And it's a word that gets used a lot. And I think each person has to identify and define what that means. And, and then how do I convey that with the person I'm in a relationship with so that they understand it? I think the other part is a couple years ago, we all heard about the love languages. Great book, I think. And what I've really come to conclude as I've gotten older is I think all the love languages apply to all of us, right? If you think about it,
Yeah.
today, this language may be important, but it may not be as important tomorrow. So I think if you think about the love languages as a whole, we want them all. It's just what's the relationship I'm in as to which language is higher. It's like the EQ on music.
Right.
One is higher today. It just depends. So love languages, again, was a really good concept. We really want them all, but not every person's going to get the same one at every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just as a side with the love languages thing, I think that there's a lot of, I have kind of mixed feelings about it too. I think there's certainly some limitations to that. But I think overall it's been a really positive pop culture type of thing because it's gotten people at least talking to their partners or thinking or talking about in general of like what does make you feel valued or wanted or something. So I think that's a super positive thing.
Yeah.
So for my insightful thought or final thought, I think echoing some of what was said before of really looking internally if we want to make our relationships work and looking at, asking ourselves questions like, am I trying to feel okay through this other person? Am I looking for them to make me feel like I'm a worthwhile person? Some of this. Another thing to look at with it in a similar spirit is really being honest with ourselves of, am I seeing certain patterns play out across my relationships, like my past relationships? Or do I seem to be drawn to or choosing or ending up with certain types of people, and then that doesn't work out for me? So it's that kind of that idea that Johnny was talking about before of, we can get in this habit of always looking and pointing the finger outward rather than of like, why does this keep happening in this way for me? So I think looking at the patterns, looking internally being one thing. And then another thing that comes to mind, my last thought about it is in the relationships themselves, I think really for the partners to be promoting and celebrating and supporting each other's independence, So if it's a woman with a guy of championing, like, go out, hang out with your friends, do these things, you have these interests, pursue it, and then the same vice versa. And then looking at if I don't feel comfortable doing that, what does that say about my relationship or about my own internal processes that like that feels like a threat to me? So I think that's something that I see as a real defining thing of relationships that are working well, where people have that independent part of their life, and then they come together.
Can I add a piece? Because you said something, that first point, you keep finding the same type of people. When relationships end, there's one of two ways they end, right? She's not worth it. He's a dog. He's terrible. That's option one. Option two is, what does this say about me? Right. So I always wonder and I use the term the energy aspect. Option one, it's really a negative energy. So if you leave, when the relationship ends, if you leave with that negative energy, she treated me wrong, she wasn't good, you're taking that to the next relationship. Option two, it's ended. What does this say about me? That is a healthier energy, kind of neutral, which means it's a growth option. So now you go the next relationship you're going into with growth about you versus the first, you're going to find the same stuff. So you said it and it triggered a thought that I think about and I've discussed with people. So
and sometimes also people just aren't in the right place for that relationship right now, and that and it ends, and it wasn't some terrible thing. It wasn't, the relationship could have been a positive thing overall in people's lives, but it just at that time, or the connection just wasn't quite right. And it's
what is it? Relationships are mathematical. Have I been in 5 bad relationships? Who's the common denominator? 1 and 2.
They are. Terrible other people.
It's not me. Yeah. And then what is it? A giver's going to give and a taker's going to take, right? So if you think about relationships, it's, again, simplifying it, but sometimes the simplicity is the best way to go about it. So
cool. Yeah, we should come back and revisit this at some point. This is a rich, super impactful topic.